So, we have one very, very, very important person in our church family here that has been a great, great, great blessing. He and his wife, Ralph and Brenda Bowen, years and years ago, going to the continent of Africa, beginning in Sierra Leone, and planting churches there. And this has been such a great blessing to us, along with the partnership we have with the church in Tucson, Pastor Warner, Pastor Alvin Smith, and then Dr. Bob Hamilton going there and doing all the medical team. It's just a wonderful thing, and just so many thousands and thousands of people being affected by that particular testimony and calling that God has put on Pastor Ralph's life. And so I'm asking, he's coming this morning and he's going to testify about calling. Listen very, very carefully, because within this testimony is just such a great, great eternal destiny for someone that might lock into the thought that comes from the calling of God on Pastor Ralph Bowen's life. My hero. Come on up here, Ralph. Hallelujah.
Praise the Lord. What a good thing. For people that don't know me, my name is Ralph Bowen, and I came to the Lighthouse Church umpteen years ago. Goodness, 35 years, 30 plus. In 89, I think it was, we kind of got here. So since then, we've been involved, and actually found the church through the Yellow Pages. So if you're someone that doesn't even know anything about the church, it's a good church. So, and I hope to speak to someone today that has a sense of looking for direction in their life. And we're going to talk a little bit about our calling, and I'll relate some of my personal history and hopefully tie it all together as a testimony for, following God's call in your life. Don't dismiss it as something, well, I might get to do it or I may not or whatever. But God is big, and he has a way to pull us all together, pull all the events of our life together, and help us to do something good for him. Because really the value of knowing that you've done something for God is so precious. It is the most wonderful thing I think that you can accomplish for God. I remember one time I was able to flip some pancakes at a church event thing, and I was thinking, wow, I'm flipping pancakes for God, and so I was excited about that. But I was born in Tampa, Florida, and I was born into a divorced family. My dad and mom divorced a year before I was born, about a year after I was born. And the end result of all of that was it kind of struggled in life. She had a sort of a bitter divorce, and I'm sorry, people out there are looking, and there are people here I want to see too. So if I'm, got the visual problem, yeah, there's people there. There's people here too. I grew up where there was a lot of struggle from that bitter divorce, and so we struggled financially. We had to repair things all the time at our house, could never afford to have the car repaired. We couldn't do a lot of things, and so we were basically poor folks, and grew up in the South, and all my relatives are from Georgia, North Carolina, and growing up, I had no comprehension of God, the Bible, sin. My mother did do a few little things. Once in a while, she would pull out the Bible and read Psalm 23 or read some Psalms to us, and that was the extent of anything. I had no idea of the word of what it meant to sin. I had no comprehension of God, Jesus, the church. All of that stuff was just totally foreign to me. I had no sort of connection with it. And so I kind of grew up that way, grew up in my early teenage years, just a naughty little boy running around, gossiping about girls and, getting in trouble. And we had a lot of goofy things that went on. And I was pretty much in school a little bit of a nerd and kind of a bookworm, real skinny. Always the last guy picked on the football team. Okay, Ralph, come on, you can hike the ball. And then I would see stars because, they thought, hey, here's a little skinny guy. Let's really cream him. And that's what they would do. I remember that. So, sports never became my thing. Let's put it that way. And so, as growing up in school, grew up in the era in the 60s when school had a real sense of, you didn't have computers. You couldn't copy and paste a map and then turn it in on a little poster board and call that an A. You had to draw the map. You had to label every city. You had to use colored pencils. You had to do all kinds of stuff in school. It was a good era for school. And we did learn about communism, come to think of it. And so there was a good education in the public system at that time. And I actually grew up in Tampa, where there was the school I went to, Broward Elementary, was awarded the most successful and best school in the United States for several years. Wow, that's great. It was a good school, but I do remember Mrs. Onus, and I remember, Mrs. Bullard, and all those people that were trying to do something for my life, which I didn't really like. I even now, I remember Bertha Bullard. She was my 6th grade teacher, and she was tough. But as I got into high school and junior high, just struggled a lot with insecurity and not knowing, not having a dad at home, not having, kind of a peaceful situation in our home. It was always a bit of turmoil and upset. So there was a lot of trouble from that. And struggled with, wanting to be popular. And so one day, a friend of mine, he said, well, let's enter into the talent contest in junior high school. I said, I don't want to do that. And so he said, yeah, let's do it. So he came out and he lip synced the song from Elvis Presley. What was it? Warden threw a party at the county jail. The prison band was okay. So that's what he did. And I came in the background and danced. So I danced. It was like a Napoleon Dynamite revelation for everybody, And so here I was, this total geek of a kid. Nobody knew it all. And then the next day, I was the hero of the school. And the kids go, come on, Ralph, do it. And, come on, And everybody was like, I was the greatest hero. And it's all of a sudden, wow, I can do something on the stage, And so in high school, as I went from junior high and into high school, I started doing theater and art. I didn't want to do sports and see stars as I got knocked over. So that's what happened, and went on through that. And in high school, just the beginning of high school, I got saved. My sisters went to, it was before, my sisters, we went to church with our aunt. Our aunt made some effort to bring us to church, and so she brought us to Baptist church, and people would go forward and everything like that. And this is like, just a strange experience to me. I had no, just grew up a nice little heathen. Why all this stuff about God and everything else? So we went to that church on a Mother's Day, and my sisters, felt convicted, and they went up to the altar to get saved. Both of my sisters, and I'm standing back there with my mom. And I thought, well, let's just go see what's going on, So that was just a curiosity to me. I had no comprehension of anything. But as I went forward, stood up there, everybody was emotional, giving testimonies. And I was like, oh, brother, what am I going to do? And all I can remember is just somebody gave me a Bible, and I saw Holy Bible written on the front of it. So I sort of rubbed it with my finger, thinking something good would happen to me, I just so totally out of anything to do with a relationship with God or any sort of understanding of sin, righteousness, heaven, hell. None of that stuff meant anything. So I got a Bible, and after that day, I started to read the Bible a little bit. So as I read the Bible, went to church, it was still a little foreign to me. Somebody started talking about the rapture being carried up into the sky, and I thought, these people are nuts. I really thought about, what are they talking about? So I kept reading the Bible. And as I read the Bible, I thought, the life here is not my life. My life is not measuring up to what I see here in this book. So I basically, one night in my depressed state of mind, as a kid growing up with, having a lot of struggles in the home life and everything, I got down on my knees. I got scared of hell, and I said, God, I don't want to go to hell. Please save me. I give my life to Jesus, and that was it. And so God began to use that, and I believe that's when I got saved. Being saved is a process. You get saved and you're going to continue to be saved, and there's things you go through, rededication. And so a lot of that kept on going. And so I went to college. The next step, you go to college, right? So I went to college thinking I wanted to study theater, and got into the first theater classes, and the professor was so into, just slamming everything sacred and everything religious. It's kind of like avant-garde and cool to slam and shock value everything sacred and religious to anybody, So he just, he said all kinds of crud in the class, and I was just like, here I am in college, and this professor's, he's saying all kinds of garbage, and I remember going in the bathroom and my, after the class, and my heart was just pounding. I didn't know what to say. One person in the class kind of stood up to him, but he was like, that real, secular university, to me, it's this. They're always working to shock value, give you some sort of something that shocks the values out of you, and that's their effort, their goal, their whole purpose, and it became. Nowadays that I look back on it, you can realize, this is so boring. Give me something of value. It's so boring. It's so much the same old thing, But it was it really bothered me. And I was going to church all that time. I was involved in the Free Methodist Church, became very involved in the youth group there, had a lot of great input into my spiritual growth because of the Free Methodist Church and the people there. And it was a real confrontation for me coming into the college, and I became despondent and discouraged about, I didn't feel like the church was really answering to this. It didn't shake my love for God, but it bothered me to the point where eventually I didn't go to that church anymore. And one of my classes required to go to a help agency and do field work or study work and volunteer at an agency, which was involved. I was going to do social work, right? That was going to be my degree, because I said, forget this theater stuff. And so I wanted to go into social work. So that required to go and do volunteer hours. So I went to a religious kind of group. I said, I want something to do with God, And so it was called Jesus Loves You. It was a boys' home for brain-injured, delinquent kids that were, there. And it was a group home, It was kind of that situation. So I ended up being so impressed with how everything went on there. I thought it was great. I quit college and moved into that place and became a counselor and stayed there for 2 years, I think. But it turned out actually kind of to be a cult. And so it was sort of a quasi-Christian cult in which, kind of like in the order of Jim Jones kind of stuff. And so that was a real dark period of my life. It was a very discouraging time. But, there was something about, I want to give my life to God. And so I was deceived. And, you can be deceived, but all of a sudden, somewhere along the line, you realize you're willingly being deceived. And so that was part of it. I got out of that. That's a total miracle how that happened. It's just the conviction of God and His Word. Somebody wrote a letter back to me, and it just brought such conviction to me. I was going from Macon, Georgia to Tennessee. We had moved to Tennessee to get away from the feds, and we were going to, we had our own little private commune and everything like that. So the Holy Spirit came on me as I was driving. I had to pull over and not crash because I finally agreed, God, your word is right, and I'm going to obey it. And I just was so convicted and got out of the thing. And my family accepted me back. They had at one point before and prior tried to kidnap me out of the cult. It was that bad. My uncle was going to come and kidnap me. Bless him. And but I got out of it. God rescued me. And then my sister, I was just struggling what to do with my life. I was 26 at that time. And my struggles and everything, my sister said, well, you are a compassionate person. Why don't you consider being a pastor? I said, oh, brother, I can't see myself preaching or being a pastor or anything like that. My sister said that to me, my sister Ann. And, but it did spark something. And mission work started to become an interest to me. I kind of was always fascinated as a kid growing up with other cultures and, drawing those maps that we had to draw in school and all that stuff. It just was fascinating to me, other places. And my first international trip was with our Free Methodist Church group. We had a singing group, and we went down to the Dominican Republic. And, that was an exposure to me for the first time. I kind of didn't remember it too much going up through my adult years up until I got into real mission work. But that particular trip that we took as a youth group, that we were down there singing, it was very, very powerful. We had sung in a village somewhere. We went, and they had prepared a meal for us. And so it was my first, third world meal. And so there it was. And, we were in line waiting. We were getting some soup. And it was soup made of plantains and chicken feet, and and so everybody else got just plantain and some pieces of meat. And this little old lady gave me she dipped in, looking at me, smiling with no teeth in her head. And she dipped in and gave me a bowl of soup with a nice chicken foot in it. And I said, oh, thank you. And, oh, Lord, what is this? So I went away with this chicken foot, and tried to gnaw on it a little bit. And so it was interesting. Let's put it that way. And but those things marked a fascination for me for other cultures and peoples. And so getting back to squaring my life away after the cult thing and my sister's advice to me, I decided that, maybe missions is something I should plan to do. And so I started to go back to a church. It was a church that was born out of the Jesus movement in Tampa. They were a little charismatic group, small church. I can remember going to some of their meetings as a teenager. And so my soul wanted something, and I wanted to get back to God. And I went back to that church, and that's where I met Brenda. I can remember going back there after the cult, sort of crawling in the back like, the rotten sinner and backslider I was. And coming into the church, and there's Brenda up there just waving her hands, worshiping God, and praising God, just looking so beautiful. And I just, turn your head, brother, don't look over there. That's how I felt, Just let me kind of, be a little doorkeeper in the house of God, and that was good enough. And I was so happy to be there. Such a blessing those people were to me. And but Brenda and I started, we got to do some ministry. So I thought, so let's do some ministry in this church, We started to do a mime group. I set up some drama stuff, and I liked mime. And so I did pantomime, and I trained Brenda in some stuff, and we got pretty decent at it. And we went to delinquent centers, and we went to churches and elementary schools and did mime for children and mime for teenagers. And that was kind of like how I met Brenda. We started working together in the Lord. It's kind of like Isaac found Rebecca out in the field. Get out in the field, get doing something. Young person, if you want to get married, find somebody that and get out there and serve God. So, as Brenda and I got to know each other, it was obvious she was in the corporate world, and she was going towards being a vice president in a Dun & Bradstreet subsidiary, and she was going back and forth to New York, San Francisco, Houston all the time. And I thought, okay, well, that's her life. I'm going to go and I'm going to do mission work. And so that church inspired me and told me, just go and pursue it then. We'll be behind you. And so I went to California, and there was a school in Pasadena that I had read about on missions and stuff like that. So I went there, looked it up. I actually visited here, and then went back to Tampa, and then made the decision I'm going to go to school, finish my degree, and get a degree in international development so I could go into a country that would perhaps not allow somebody to go in. I wanted to maybe go in teaching English or doing development work or something like that to be able to present the gospel to unreached peoples. So this was the thing. And so I kind of said goodbye to Brenda. It was kind of sad. And so we thought our ways were taking us a different way. But I had given Brenda a YWAM calendar. And YWAM is Youth with a Mission. And in this calendar, they went through different tribes and peoples that have never heard the gospel and how to pray for them. And so Brenda went through that calendar, would pray every day, and then she began to pray for these people. God, send somebody into this tribe. Send someone here. God, she began to realize, well, I'm a somebody. I could go. And she did, just that conviction started to grow on her. And so in the meantime, I went to the Philippines to do a field study and to study different cultures. Went and lived with a tribal group called the Ifugao. That was really fascinating. I spent 6 months in the Philippines. I lived in a house with a little old lady and went to her garden with her and, did all the wrong things that you're not supposed to do, like, drink water off the ground and what else? Do hillside farming that's really bad for erosion. And I did all those things that, we learned in school. You're not supposed to do that. So I went and we had it just began, you begin to realize, all these things you want to do, we're all just so weak. Really, and it kind of got onto me. It was apparent to me one day. We went to her farm. In this particular tribe, they have a basket they strap onto their back, but the strap of the basket doesn't go around the shoulder. It goes across the forehead, and it's strapped around you. So you're walking with this thing on your head like this. So, I went with her to the garden one day. We're out there working, picking beans, doing stuff, and we came back. And there had been rain, and the little stream we crossed had turned into a torrent. So it was this huge, raging sort of thing. And she just walks right out there. She could have been 86 years old. Nobody knew how really old she was. But she was real strong, but very thin and very old, and just carrying on with life. And she was saved. She was a Christian. And so she walked out there across the stream and went out, and so I started to follow. I'm the American lackey. Doesn't know anything, but I'm 26 years old. I think I'm buff and everything, and I can handle this. So I go out across the stream, and all of a sudden something slips, the rock slips, and I'm starting to get carried away down the stream. I thought, oh no, her vegetables, they're going to be in the stream. I was thinking but I was worried about that. This is this poor woman's stuff, and I don't want to be responsible for dumping it all in the river and it's gone down. And so I was struggling, and she saw me, and so she went and she took her machete, went over there and hacked off a piece of bamboo and walked out and handed it to me and guided me back onto the shore safely. This little 86-year-old woman helping this 26-year-old strapping young man to get across the stream so he wouldn't die and ruin the vegetables. So this was it. And then we got to the side of the stream there, and I let the basket down and sat down. We laughed really hard. We couldn't understand each other. She was speaking Ifugao, and so my amount of Ifugao was this little. I was supposed to be learning it, but it was really hard. And she laughed so hard. I'd never seen her laugh so hard. I laughed so hard, and we kept laughing. And for 3 days after that, I would just start bursting out laughing, and she would know what I was laughing at, and she would laugh. How silly. Here is a young man who can't even handle getting across a stream. And there's so much of life like that, isn't it? We think we can handle something, and we can't. We're weak, and we don't quite make it sometimes. And that was a very powerful experience to be in the Philippines. And be part of that. We were in a church there. I got to preach. I didn't even know how to bring somebody to an altar call or tell them about, I didn't know what to do. So, and everybody's like waiting breath, what next? How do I get saved? And I didn't know really how to tell them to get saved, what to do. It was like it was so green at everything about the gospel and preaching it. So, but it was exciting. And, then, I finished back in California, came back, finished school, and Brenda and I got married. She said, okay, I'll be a missionary. God spoke to her. She's got a powerful testimony. And she and I came here to California so I could finish up my courses here. And we decided to actually live here on the west side towards West Los Angeles area instead of living in Pasadena and her commuting to her job. She had a good job offer. They transferred her from Tampa to Los Angeles, and so that was how we were able to financially manage and be a part of it, and I could continue to go to school. So I said, well, you got to be nice to your wife. It's your wife, dude. So I... So I said, no, I will commute and we will live nearby. So that's how we got over here on the west side. That's how we looked in the phone book. I think we went to 2 or 3 churches, 2 churches. And it just didn't click. And then we came to the Lighthouse one Sunday night, and Bill Pritchett was preaching on the Holy of Holies. And just the demeanor of the church and the pastor and the vision, we just both looked at each other and said, this is it, so we're going to, because it was important to be in church. It was an important thing to be in church and to be a part of church. You hear that out there? It's important. And it is really important to be a part of church. And so Pastor Rob knew that I had wanted to be involved in missions work. And somewhere along the line in my teenage years, I had a dream where I was in a tropical third world country, and on the ground, I was there drawing some doodles in the sand, and there was children around me. There was kids, and I don't know where that came from or what reason that was, but I thought, this is a call in my life. It's a little bit more dramatic sometimes, I think, than some people might have as they get to the call of their life, because, but at the same time, it was just, there was a lot of things that happened in my life that all conglomerate together and make it such that these experiences of my life became tools to do the mission work that we were able to do and be able to sustain and be there in those situations and in those countries that we lived in. We lived in 3 different countries, spent some years in each to preach the gospel and pioneer churches. And it became a very a very powerful and experience where you sit back and you look back at it, and then you can say, okay, that was God's will. And I think a lot of people, their experience in life is you're looking back at things that you did, and you kind of know that you've gone in the direction God wanted you to go by looking back. Because there's so much that can sort of happen in life that you have to adjust to or you have to do. And in my testimony, it brought me to the place of Ecclesiastes chapter 9, where the Bible says the race is not to the swift. That definitely I was not a very sportive person. So it wasn't me, having a testimony of being in the NFL, right, Rob? And so it definitely wasn't there. Nor the battle to the strong, nor bread to the wise, nor riches to men of understanding, nor favor of men of skill, but time and chance happen to them all. And so there it is. Time and chance happens to us all. And sometimes I think when we think of our calling, we have this sort of, we get fixed on this, there's got to be some mystical, powerful invitation, falls from heaven, a piece of paper you find in your room and it's written in gold, thus you shall be an executive, or whatever. Your call of life doesn't always quite come like that. And I think, God does make us with giftings, make us with talents, make us with experiences. And he sort of grabs the whole bag of stuff together like an organic sort of, grabs it all together and just fertilizes it, whatever. All those haphazard things that happened in your life can be used for the call of God in your life in the future. And the verse goes on and says, for man does not know his time. And you can also think, I think of Paul. He quite knew his calling, but for the majority of his life, he had not. And he was just doing stuff. And his life culminated in everything that he had experienced and learned and did in life, sort of pointed him in a direction in which he really kind of didn't have too much control over it. So sometimes the call of God, I think, comes where we don't really have too much control over it. Or, as this verse here goes on to say, for man does not know his time, like a fish taken in a cruel net, like birds caught in a snare, so the sons of men are snared up in an evil time when it falls on them suddenly. And so the course and the events of history can just sweep people up in a net of things that happen that I did not intend to happen. My life became, sort of a haphazard conglomerate of stuff that, molded together into making, my time in Africa not so difficult. I knew how to repair a car because my mom, in her struggles, got a little auto mechanics book, and we read a book, and she said, get down under there and pull that hose off, And so I remember being a teenager having to do stuff like that. I couldn't really do it. It was hard. I remember even one time under a car, just tears streaming down my eyes. I'm trying to, take a bolt and unloosen a bolt. But we were just like struggling. My mom and all of her struggles trained me for Africa. So it was like a net. I was caught up in this net of chance and time and brought into this place and then brought there, so in Africa it was no big deal. I could handle having a car fixed, and I trained guys how to fix cars. Some of the guys that were my disciples, we worked on fixing cars. There are other things that you do, that practical things that we did. But just the privilege of being able to stand up in front of African congregations and preach the gospel and see lives transformed, that's like, who am I? Some little divorced kid of a divorce, and a little skinny kid from Tampa, Florida, never had anything going. All of a sudden, it's just all thrown together. And then I got to do something for God. And I think anybody's life is like that. Sometimes it's real dramatic and, oh, a missionary, and people kind of look at it that way. But there are people doing mission work right here in the Lighthouse Church, right as you speak. They are doing things, and they're involved in things. And it may not be so dramatic or so lofty as mission work, but everything before God is valuable, and the calling of God, I believe, is irrevocable. Once you're called to God, there might be seasons where you don't do particularly what you were called to, kind of like Paul told Timothy. Timothy, you're a pastor, but do the work of evangelist. So you have to cross-reference sometimes and do something that is not your calling. I've heard some people, there'll be a piece of trash on the floor or something, and oh, that's not my calling, No, pick the trash up, dude. What's wrong with you? It's like, so it's kind of like, I kind of get like, you can do a lot of things. You can be doing many, many things, but the calling of God is somehow you look back on it and then you know it. That's what it was. You look back, and looking back at your past, sometimes you realize, wow, that was the will of God. And so that's basically my testimony for you this morning. I hope it kind of encouraged folks and encouraged them that they can, your life is valuable. Your life is valuable. We're not the sum of all of our mistakes and all of the things that happen to us, or the fact that we are caught up in a net of history and tossed here and about and gone through whatever. God can use your life, and so that's a blessing. God bless you, and we will return.